Well, thank you everyone for coming along to today's aerospace briefing and braving the horrors of a certain virus that it may or may not be permeating to come to our chalet today. And indeed to come along to the Singapore Airshow writ large. Very different vibe to this year's event, but I think hopefully we can create a bunker mentality and remain firm friends. Steve, I believe you had a rather wonderful memento from IAI. You might want to share with the gang?
It says, I beat coronavirus in Singapore Airshow 2020.
Now, obviously, we don't know that to be true as yet, but fingers crossed. So, I'm going to get our illustrious panel to introduce ourselves, and then we're going to engage in a whistle-stop tour of market trends, some facts and figures from our lead analysts, but really this will only work if we get a very good Q&A session going. So I'll pass the microphone down the line, and then we'll take it from there. So thank you once again. Refreshments are available. I can see some of you have already found the adult beverages, so please feel free to join them. So thank you very much for coming.
I am Steve Trimble. I'm the defense editor. I'm based in Washington, D.C. This is my third Singapore Airshow, but the first one with Aviation Week. So I'm happy to be here and glad to answer your questions.
My first year as well, actually, in Singapore. My name's Caffrey. I'm a senior analyst at Aviation Week. Joined about a year ago, 12 years at James before that. So I work on the databases, primarily defense now. I do a bit of commercial as well, work on some of the assumptions around our overall list.
I'm Jens Flottau, executive editor, commercial aviation. I just tried to figure out how many times I've been in Singapore Airshow, but I think my first one was in 2000. So.
My name is Chen Chuanren. I'm the Southeast Asia and China editor for Air Transport World of Aviation Week. Joined Air Transport World for close to 2 years now. Previously, I served in the Singapore Air Force, so if you have any defense Air Force related questions, I can probably answer a little bit. This is my first air show with Aviation Week, but probably my 10th air show in my entire life.
Hi, my name's Guy Norris. I'm the Los Angeles-based technical and senior editor for Aviation Week. Been with Aviation Week since 2007, and just realised that when I first came to the Singapore Air Show, it was 30 years ago, and where we're standing now would have probably been under about 10 feet of water, so I'm glad to be at this particular one.
Thank you. Sorry, my name is Paul Burton. I'm Managing Director of the business in Asia Pacific, based in Singapore. Many air shows down, like our panel. So I think we'll kick off today with a view from Jens on the commercial landscape. Obviously all things 737 MAX still on everyone's lips, and then perhaps we can engage in a conversation around that particular market. So Jens, over to you, sir.
Thanks, Paul. Well, since this is about market trends, I kind of have to start with some virus impact stuff. There's been a lot of talk about, this is similar to SARS, and well, obviously we don't know yet, but I'd like to just point you to some stats and say it's may actually be much bigger than SARS, at least the impact on the industry. So SARS 2003, the Chinese airlines had combined 700 aircraft. They have 4,000 today. China's obviously a much bigger market now. Looking at the impact these days, on the 5th of February, Chinese airlines had 16,000 flights scheduled. They actually operated 4,900. On the 10th, 18,000 scheduled, 6,177 operated. So for now, it seems that generally operations stabilize at about 1/3 of what was once planned. And there's some airlines that have actually temporarily stopped flying altogether. Genghis Khan, Grand China, Fuzhou, Air Travel, for some days they didn't fly. they have started flying again at a very low number of flights. Some others, OK, Jingji, have flown less than 10% of their schedule. If you look at Hainan, Shenzhen, Tianjin, Kunming, Guilin, Tibet, they were below 20%. So huge impact. The big ones, Air China, they were at about 30%. Of course, the impact isn't limited to China, as you all know. Cathay Pacific cut 90% of its China network. There's a huge impact in Korea. We've seen this boom in the launch of low-cost carriers in the past few years, which are now heavily dependent on China traffic. You might look at Thailand as well, where Chinese tourists are the biggest group of tourists coming into the country. So huge impact. So for many of these carriers, the next few months will simply be about surviving this, protecting cash flow as much as possible. And then if you look at the point in time when the virus is believed to be under control, it will be about recovery and reinstating capacity to what was planned before. Again, people pointing to SARS, where they said, the bottom was reached after about 2-3 months, and then the recovery took another 3 months. So the thing was done in 6 months. That's true, and it may be the same this time. Who knows? I'd just like to point out that the recovery itself was painful too, because at the time, if you're trying to get people back to flying, what are you going to do? You're going to offer cheap fares. Now, it's one thing if you have a few airlines operating a limited number of aircraft in 2003. It's very different in 2020 when you have so many new airlines, so many more aircraft, and the market being that big. So that will be financially painful to many airlines, and I would suspect that the recovery, therefore, is going to be lasting quite a long time. There's a lot of questions that arise. Obviously, how is the Chinese government going to react? And in fact, we are seeing these past days the first signs of a pretty pronounced reaction, actually. So the losses you incur now, you can write off over 8 years. The previous limit was 5 years. There's an infrastructure levy that every passenger had to pay, which is now being suspended. So the Chinese government is already reacting to help its airlines, as one might expect. Of course, other airlines outside of China that depend on China traffic do not have that support in many cases. So you may run into the ironic situation of airlines outside of the country being impacted more than the Chinese airlines, even though their traffic has seen the decline. I just noted some questions without claiming that I have the answer. When you look at future structural impact, I mean, what's the future of HNA Group, which has been struggling for a long time? Will there be more consolidation in the industry? How about the role of Cathay? To what extent will it be weakened? How quickly can it recover? Looking beyond airlines, what will this mean for production rates, for orders? We're going to go into this a little later. Boeing is highly dependent on the reopening of the China market for its wide-body production. 787 was just cut down from 14 to 12 to 10. Well, if China doesn't come back soon, it's going to struggle. So that's really an open question. Airbus too could well use some more orders for the 330neo, and obviously China is a huge huge customer base for the aircraft, for regional operations. So it's all up in the air, and we've talked to people here from both of them, Guy and I, and so obviously I expect a pause until there's more clarity. So aircraft market in general, I have a few things that I'd like to say. We've been in a narrow body market globally. There's been prolonged weakness in the wide body market, and frankly, I don't see that changing anytime soon. In the wide body market, the orders that you are seeing these days and those that you will see in the future are mainly for replacement. Now there's kind of light at the end of the tunnel because a bigger part of the A330 classic fleet is coming up for replacement just because of age. Same is probably true for the 777. So things will improve, but my prediction would be that it will be a long and slow process, and certainly not as quick as Boeing would hope and Airbus would hope. On the MAX, we need to talk about the MAX, I guess, and I won't repeat the obvious, but I would just point you to the March dates, the March timeframe. In March, the grounding the aircraft will have been grounded for a year. So many of the customers will have, in fact, all of the customers will have the opportunity to get out of their orders, because that's when, if you don't deliver for a year, you can. My guess is not many or not too many will do that, although it's really not for me to know. But many will use the opportunity to renegotiate. So there's huge uncertainty about pricing, there's huge uncertainty about timing, and because it's now a year, customers have a lot more power in the negotiations than they had until now. Airbus is in a comfortable position, obviously, and they have two choices now. They can go for market share and sell at discounts and make the most of the situation, or they can go for yields and just demand high prices for their aircraft. So what I'm hearing, or I've heard over the past few weeks, including in Dublin, where the big air finance conferences took place, is that Airbus is going for yields. If you want to get an A321neo, an A320neo, it's very, very expensive right now. So if you hear, that Airbus isn't taking advantage of the situation, and we're all trying to be, not gentlemen. Well, trying to be gentlemen. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's true to an extent, but on the pricing side, you actually see some action and some benefiting. Just before I finish, some observations on the market. Right now, airlines globally operate soon they will operate around 1,000 narrow bodies less than they would have if the MAX wasn't grounded. Still in 2019 was the first year that you saw retirements go up significantly. They went up to about 700 aircraft. They were at around 500 before for a number of years. Which to me begs the question, have people been over-ordering? Has there been, have people, lessors, airlines, have they ordered too many aircraft? And if I analyze this and try to interpret this, my answer is, I guess yes. And that again brings us back to the question of what is actually going to happen from March onwards as these negotiations on max deliveries and compensation and pricing resume or intensify. Maybe we'll see more changes than we think. I don't know. It's just an observation. On Neo and max competition, I just want to point out that I think the market has ruled before the grounding that the Neo is the stronger product, and that therefore Boeing has to do something and has to look again at issues like the NMA, whether it's the right product, the right strategy. And what we've heard here, talking to people at Boeing, is that, and what Boeing's said in the past few weeks, is that it is redefining the concept. So no surprise. All right, so I think that's all I have.
Do you want to pass the guy for more comments?
Got it? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks, Jens. Yeah, basically what he said.
Sorry.
The only sort of I tend to focus on Boeing, so I on the NMA side, as Jens has mentioned, obviously they're going back to the drawing board on that. It's a clean sheet. They do the thing that is really that's come home to us, I think, in this week is that although NMA has gone or been shelved, Boeing has learned so much by that process over the past 5 years that it now feels prepared to accelerate into a new design which is more pinpointed at the market needs, with a new production system that will change the game essentially. That's what they're hoping, and that's what they're telling us. So we're hoping that we're going to be reporting on this over the next year as Boeing actually finalizes this new direction that they've discussed. But essentially, from what we seem to be gathering, they seem to be really focusing on taking on the A321 XLR head on, rather than trying to develop a new family that covers the 7.5 and 7.6 replacement markets. So you're hearing this for the first time. This has not even been published, this news. We're about to publish it. Literally, we're over there totally doing it as we speak. But we literally gleaned this intelligence a couple of hours ago, and we think it's quite significant if it's in fact true. So anyway, I'm going to pass you back down the line here, but just when I get to talk a little bit further, I'm going to delve into the way that the industry is reshaping itself, certainly from the commercial prospect. It's being driven and galvanized by these environmental pressures, which have become both at Airbus and Boeing probably the number one new driving factor in terms of product development. That's changed a lot since certainly the last Singapore. It's a trend that we're seeing right across the industry. Everybody's driving towards lower emissions, not just because it sounds good, it's because they have to. So we'll talk a bit more about that if there's time.
Maybe Chen, your thoughts on the show as you've seen and regional implications for recent.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's probably start with the show. Thank you everyone, my international friends from coming down as a Singaporean, supporting this show and giving your confidence to the Singapore healthcare system. But yes, following up to what Jens has said, the impact of the virus to regional countries. I think one of the biggest hit that we might see is Thailand. And of course, with Thailand being sort of the biggest hit, you might see Thai Airways getting into deeper trouble. They have been suffering losses for years. And they thought they might get a breather this year because the Chinese passengers are coming back again. For about 2 over years, the Chinese are not coming to China to Thailand because of a couple of incidents. And to give you some numbers, 11 million Chinese goes to Thailand every year. So the city of Wuhan is 11 million. So imagine the whole city of Wuhan goes to China every year. And now that the ban means practically they have suffered a huge number of losses because of visitorship. So the big question is whether Thai will able to sustain as long as we hope. Now the government is quite hesitant on pumping money to Thai because they want to buy new aircraft, and the government is telling them to review their procurement plans. So that's something to think about. Within China, I feel that the three big state carriers will definitely be still around because of, as I said, state carriers, they have the Chinese government backings. A lot of your fringe airlines, like Sichuan, and these are government linked. So we have joint ventures with local cities, governments. So they'll be more or less pretty safe. But LCCs like Spring, which is 100% privatized, so that will be very interesting to see how they develop. I feel that Spring, over the last 1 or 2 years, they have been the strongest in terms of their profit margins, about 20% profit growth quarter on year. So I think for over the last few years or months, they have given themselves a good cushion. So we'll see how much cushion they have built upon. And again, we don't know how long the whole COVID-19 virus, I think it's called right now, will last. So it's just time will tell. Over the show, I think despite the numerous pull-ups, the show has been pretty interesting. As a journalist, you still see a couple of interesting signings. ATR, for example, we had the PNG Air signing, and this morning you had US Bangla according to ATR 72s. So it's not all doom and gloom. Yes. Yeah. So again, that's all I have for now. I'll be happy to take questions regarding the virus. We have been tracking the virus for more than 2 months. We started tracking as soon as the first news broke out in Wuhan. And we're happy to take questions later. Thank you.
So I think to complete our overview for now on the commercial landscape, we'll go back to Guy just for an insight into how sustainability is a key theme, not only at the show, but at in the industry writ large. Certainly an area that Aviation Week is focusing on very closely this year as a key theme. But Guy, I know it's something you've been looking at very closely over the previous months. So your insights there, please.
Yeah, right. So the sustainability, yes, thanks, Paul. Absolutely, it's a major focus, obviously, now for the industry. I think when we visited Airbus in May last year, and the chief technology officer at the time said her ambition was to get Greta Thunberg to fly on an Airbus aircraft. And it's she was sort of half joking, really. She really meant it, I think. It's become a driving force, and now with governments starting to see that it's a popular type of opinion, certainly some governments anyway, it's only going to get more so. So what we're really looking at is a transition from classic gas turbine engines at the lower end of the market to more increasingly hybrid electric and non-conventional propulsion systems. Obviously, this is going to take a long time to come into fruition, but our information certainly indicates that from the grassroots up, it's a change which is happening rapidly, driven in part because of the new battery technology that's been pushed through from the automotive industry and accelerated into first use with urban air mobility, which is the eVTOLs, the electric-powered vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that are being studied by Uber around the world. And even today, Airbus and the Civil Aviation Authority of Singapore signed a deal to study the implementation of urban air mobility in Singapore. Yesterday, Bell signed a similar deal with Japan Airlines to look at implementation of urban air mobility in Japan. Uber is expecting to begin its first trials in Los Angeles next year, followed by Dallas, Melbourne shortly after that. So you can see the trend is starting that these crazy flying car type vehicles are really coming, and one with the other, whether it's successful or not. But the technology at the base of all this is battery technology, new electrics, which will help then feed a new fleet of regional aircraft, 9 to 19 seaters that are going to follow. Then you kind of you come to a cliff, at which point you have to look at hybrids, which are going to be gas turbines and electric systems. And at that point, you begin to see a transition. From there on, when you want to start to achieve the levels that have been targeted for the world by 2050, which is essentially a carbon neutral society, it's only going to happen if alternate fuels have become widespread. They are available and they will become more widespread. But secondly, that if new hybrid propulsion concepts and new shapes are adopted. So here at the show yesterday, Airbus unveiled a blended wing body design. It's a Boeing, of course, has looked at that for 20 years, but if Airbus is starting to look at it, then maybe there's a new dynamic involved in that. And that's just a few basic examples. The other last thing in this area that we should talk about is the fact that Pratt & Whitney, of course, changed the game with the geared turbofan engine in this business. It's gone back into the industry. The potential savings that the geared turbofan represents, essentially 12 to 20% over the current generation, is now going to be a springboard for the next leap. The engine architecture is being explored by NASA to be a more electric engine as well. So that'll help again to this electrification of the industry. The drive to make electricity a fundamental part of the next generation is being seen as significant as the invention of the jet engine was in the 40s, and it's now called the third age of aviation. So don't be fooled by the people who are the cynics who don't believe this is going to happen. It's got to happen in some form or other. There's a cynic just